out for the spiky bits!
Guard bots nearby. Approach with caution.
Guard bots! Watch out for the spiky bits!
Body, Byteland Overclocked, is a brand new 3D action platformer set inside a computer. The little robot protagonist and the two little flying friends traversing different PC parts sounds fun on paper, but unfortunately, none of it work out here at all. In fact, a lot of it ends up being antithetical to a good 3D platformer experience. So let's talk about it. The visuals are bright and shiny, but the designs have little to do with the theme. It's a pretty standard collection of platformer stages, sandy beaches, poisonous sewers, and city skyscrapers. The whole inside a PC shtick is not really communicated visually. Sure, there's electricity, robots, and magnets, but looking at the footage, I don't think you would know that the green gooey area is the graphics card, or that the ocean and the beaches lead to the processor. Think about Mario 64, or Banjo-Kazooie, some of the earliest 3D platformers of all time. How crazy are those levels? Womp's Fortress is all about verticality and you can approach it in so many ways. Mambo's Mountain has so many varied ideas for an introductory stage. Jolly Roger Bay's atmosphere is unmatched. Finding Clanker in his cavern through exploration is so memorable. They're also different aesthetically too, and their layouts are legendary. Body stages being so generic makes it entirely forgettable for anyone who has played even a few games like it beforehand. Every stage is just a bunch of forgettable rooms and floating platforms with death pits one after another. The game's personality suffers because it lacks identity in this area, and the absence of memorable locations leaves its overly shiny exterior feeling plastic and cheap. The animations and designs don't fare much better. The titular character body doesn't have hands and instead uses the big ears it has as a substitute. While the attack animations are fun, with a nice spin and twirl at the end of a combo, the double jump looks off. Body just kind of resets the animation midair. The enemies also don't communicate their attacks all that well. Some have seemingly randomly activated periods of invulnerability, but they can hit you during it regardless. A boss might have a hitbox on their entire body and just start moving before you can react. This extends to the platforming too. Some platforms are not grabbable, but once again, you don't know that because there's no indicator. These are the sort of things that need to be clear to the player. If the game is not consistent, they will be afraid to experiment in future levels, missing the more creatively hidden collectibles. I also found myself wanting to get fights over with because of my growing pains with getting hit out of nowhere. The game's lack of flair and basic animations also makes the most common actions boring to perform after a while. The jump in a platformer needs to really communicate the weight of the character. You need to feel the arc through the timings of the animation to be certain of where you want to land and feel stylish while doing so. A little spin that sort of contorts the model is a bit underwhelming. Audio design doesn't help either. There's a lack of punchiness to anything because everything sounds kinda squeaky and gets lost in a lot of the other sounds. The soundtrack is nice if generic, but it has extremely short loops. The levels are fairly long when you're trying to explore and find collectibles, so this becomes a pretty serious offense fairly quickly. Your two robot companions, 0 and 1, talk and quip constantly to seemingly fill the void, but end up being more annoying than helpful. They announce that enemies or collectibles are nearby, but they don't have enough voice lines. This is especially egregious with the former. I would count 5 to 8 repeats of the same phrase one after the other. You better destroy everything before exploring because this will not stop. They are also unnecessarily mean-spirited at times, bantering with each other in a very aggressive manner. The communication between the player and the game is a constant issue. Sometimes there is none, sometimes there is far too much. But it's all made worse by the sheer amount of bugs I encountered. Everything from visual glitches to soft locks. A character model in a cutscene would double up on itself. A cutscene would have no sound or subtitles, or sometimes would just not play altogether. A cutscene would play too late and put me behind a door that locked itself as I passed it, forcing me to reload the game from the menu. I would fall under the map. The animations for damaging things were missing. An invisible wall appeared preventing progress and required another restart. Enemies would stop reacting to me altogether most of the time. Hits would not register like it's a fighting game on a terrible internet connection. And so much more. You name a bug and it was probably there and I played it. It felt like trying to get a game from the late 90s to run on Windows 10. A lot of these occurred in the later stages, and I would record more if the game did not have only one save state and gets deleted when you press the new game button once, without any warning. But even if all of that was to be completely fixed, I don't think body's mechanics and level design are enjoyable enough to pull through. They're either unintuitive, slow, or frustrating. Levels are split between platforming, puzzles, exploration, combat, and an occasional slide or vehicle section. The platforming feels bad because, well, the jumping feels bad, as mentioned before. Speaking of mechanics though, body can hover, and to do that the player has to hold the jump button. This means holding it does not actually impact the arc or distance of the jump itself like in most other platformers. Every jump requires an additional input like a glide, double jump, or dash just to course correct. This slows down the pace dramatically. Rayman 2, for example, has a very similar moveset. There, holding the button also doesn't extend the jump, but the animation is split into these three parts: ascending, mid-air roll, and falling. Additionally, only after pressing the jump button a second time and holding it can you glide. A simple difference, but one that changes a lot. Additionally, that game's level design is just more suited for the moveset as compared to Body's, where there are a lot of simple jumps that could be completed way faster. The exploration can be fun, but the game provides you with a sensor to find things. This is on top of 0 and 1 announcing that things are nearby, which combined make discoveries unrewarding. They also comment when picking them up, and the jingle while finding things is just a jumbled mess of sounds instead of something clear and catchy. The jingle of a Jiggy or Mario Stars are a good comparison here as well. There are also gates requiring a certain amount of currency gained by defeating enemies, destroying objects, and some optional platforming sections. If you play through a level too fast, you'll have to stop and gather them. The puzzles often consist of holding the pull or push button for 15 seconds. The combat consists of spamming attacks until it's over. All of this combined lets my playtime on some of the later levels totaling 20 to 30 minutes of little to no satisfaction. This is way too long for levels that are not all that varied. There is usually one big puzzle in a level, while the rest are filled with overlong combat sections and unimaginative platforming challenges. This is the length of a Banjo-Kazooie level, completed in full. But in there, I'm changing into an animal, fighting a mini-boss, flying around, completing puzzles, talking to characters, swimming underwater, learning new moves, and more. And at my own pace, too. I'm also not a big fan of 3D platformer combat. It's usually just pressing one button until a thing is dead. Sometimes you get to jump on things, occasionally you get a Psychonauts 2 that uses all the platforming tools for combat, but it's an absolute rarity in the genre. Body is not one of the exceptions. Some sections consist of these enemy spawners dropping, and you have to smack them 3 times each, alongside each enemy remaining. It takes way too long, and as mentioned previously, the hit detection and the random invulnerability are a pain. The slides and vehicles in Body are the bane of my existence. They're just not snappy and feel like you're controlling a bar of soap all of a sudden. 3D platformers are no stranger to vehicle sections, and they're usually the most annoying part of each, so I guess that checks out. Whenever Body had the chance to abandon a staple for the better, it chose not to. The game generally seems to take all the wrong lessons. It has heart and the effort is clear despite all the bugs, but it's just a mess of ideas that feels like it just plods along. Boring section after boring section, each for different reasons. This is why Body Bite Lamp Overclocked is an example of how not to make a 3D platformer.